The distress beacon pierced through the void like a dying scream. Captain Valdris Kethmar of the hegemony cruiser Bone Cleaver smiled as he watched the human vessel Meridian's Hope drift helplessly in space, its hull breached in 17 places. Crimson emergency lights flickered through the tears in the metal, painting the darkness with the color of blood. 23 humans aboard, reported his tactical officer, tentacles writhing with excitement, all life signs failing rapidly. Valdris had earned his reputation hunting the scattered remnants of humanity across the outer rim. The war had been over for 3 years now, Earth reduced to radioactive ash, but these persistent survivors kept slipping through hegemony space like parasites. The Meridian's Hope had been carrying refugees, families, children, the desperate dregs of a dead species. No survivors, Valdris ordered, his 4 eyes gleaming. Let them suffocate in the dark. The human ship's final transmission crackled. Through the comm system, a single word in their primitive language repeated over and over until the power failed. Vindication. 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 Valdris dismissed it as the meaningless babbling of the dying. Humans always spoke of abstract concepts, hope, justice, vengeance, as if the universe cared about their feelings. The strong survived. The weak perished. This was natural law. But as the Bone Cleaver prepared to jump to hyperspace, something impossible happened. The sensor array screamed warnings. Space itself seemed to fold, reality bending like heated metal. A massive shadow materialized from nowhere, not through hyperspace or any known method of travel, but as if it had always been there, waiting. The ship was wrong. Not just alien, but fundamentally wrong. Its hull was absolute black, drinking in light and giving nothing back. No energy signatures, no thermal readings, no electromagnetic emissions. It existed in violation of physics, a hole in space shaped like vengeance. What? What is that thing? Whispered the tactical officer. Valdris stared at his sensors, watching. The impossible readings. The vessel was massive, easily twice the size of his heavy cruiser, but somehow felt larger, as if its true dimensions existed in folded space. Strange symbols pulsed along its hull, not painted or carved, but somehow woven into the fabric of reality itself. Then came the transmission. Not through radio or quantum entanglement, but directly into their minds, speaking in every language simultaneously. You have taken what was precious. You have spilled innocent blood. You have forgotten that some debts transcend death. The voice carried the weight of cold stars and the patience of eternity. It spoke with the authority of something that had witnessed the birth and death of galaxies. I am the vindication. I am the promise kept. I am the shadow that follows every crime against humanity. You may kill us, scatter us, burn our worlds, but you cannot escape the reckoning. Valdris's 4 hands trembled as he reached for the weapons console. His ship carried enough firepower to glass a planet, but facing this black monstrosity, he felt like a child with a toy sword. Target the unknown vessel, he ordered, his voice cracking. All weapons, maximum yield. But even as the words left his mouth, Valdris knew with absolute certainty that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans had always been strange, talking about their bonds with each other, their promises to the dead, their belief that love transcended flesh. He had dismissed it as weakness. Now, staring into the abyss that had come for him, he realized it might be the strongest force in the universe. The Vindication had been sleeping for 73 years when the call came. Deep in the quantum-folded heart of the vessel, consciousness stirred. Not artificial intelligence, something far more complex and terrifying. The ship was alive, woven from the collective memory of humanity's greatest loss, fed by the psychic resonance of every murdered child, every burned world, every species-wide atrocity committed against the human race. Commander Lirelai Voss had been the first to die aboard the original Vindication, a prototype vessel designed to test humanity's most dangerous experiment, binding human consciousness directly to ship systems. The military had called it Project Eternal Vigil, the creation of vessels that would carry the memories and purpose of their crews beyond death. When Earth fell, when the last human military installations were reduced to slag, the Vindication had felt every death like a physical blow. The ship had gone dark, drifting in the void, its crew dead, its purpose seemingly ended. But death was not the end for something like the Vindication. It was transformation. The ship had become something new, a convergence of technology and will, of human determination and cosmic justice. It remembered every face of every person it had failed to protect. It carried their voices, their hopes, their unfinished business. And now, awakened by the death of 23 more humans, it had work to do. Analysis complete, the ship whispered, to itself in Lyralay's voice, now merged with 1,000 others. Hegemony Vessel Bone Cleaver, Captain Valdris Kethmar commanding. Confirmed perpetrator of the Centauri massacre, the Kepler colony incident, and 16 other acts of genocide. The Vindication's weapons systems hummed to life. Not energy weapons or kinetic projectiles, but something far more personal. The ship could reach into the quantum foam itself, manipulating probability, causality, the very foundation of reality. It had learned these tricks during its long sleep, guided by the collective unconscious of a species that refused to accept defeat. Captain, Valdris's first salvo struck the Vindication with the force of a small star. Plasma beams that could vaporize mountains, exotic matter projectiles that could crack moons, particle weapons that could strip atoms apart. All of it struck the black hull and simply disappeared, absorbed into the ship's impossible geometry. Your weapons cannot harm that which is already dead, the Vindication replied through the void. But our memory is very much alive. The response was not destruction, but revelation. The Vindication reached out with invisible tendrils of force, bypassing shields and armor, touching the minds of every crew member aboard the Bone Cleaver. Suddenly, Valdris and his crew experienced every moment of terror, every scream of pain, every last breath of the humans they had murdered. The Hegemony crew collapsed, overwhelmed by the psychic weight of their crimes. They felt what it was like to watch their children burn, to see their lovers spaced, to die alone in the cold dark with nothing but the hope that someone, somewhere, would remember them. This is what you have done, the Vindication spoke gently, almost sadly. This is the weight you carry. Feel it, know it. Let it teach you what it means to take a life. But this was only the beginning. The Vindication had not come merely to punish one ship, one crew. It had come to deliver a message to the entire Hegemony. Humanity's debt would be paid in full, with interest compounded across the years of genocide. Broadcast this to your Admiralty, the Vindication commanded as it began to weave quantum filaments around the Bone Cleaver, preparing to drag it into folded space. Tell them that the humans are not extinct. We are evolved, we are patient, and we are coming. Admiral Crexius Vorthok received the transmission aboard the Hegemony flagship Eternal Dominion with the kind of cold fury that had made his species the apex predators of the galaxy. The message was brief. The Bone Cleaver had been taken, its crew found days later on an abandoned asteroid, alive but changed. They spoke in whispers of impossible things, of feeling the deaths of strangers, of a ship that existed outside normal space-time. Mass hallucination, Vorthak declared to his assembled fleet commanders. The humans are extinct. I watched their sun burn out myself. But even as he spoke, reports flooded in from across Hegemony space, ships going dark in the outer systems. Entire patrol fleets found drifting empty, their crews vanished without a trace. And always, always, the same message left behind. Vindication comes. Captain Nexus Trillin of the dreadnought World Ender was the first to encounter the Black Ship during a routine patrol of the Vega system. His vessel was a monument to hegemony power, 12 kilometers of armored death bristling with enough weaponry to sterilize solar systems. Trillin had personally overseen the destruction of New Geneva, watching from orbit as the human colony burned. The Vindication materialized like a memory made manifest, its impossible angles hurting to look at directly. This time, it did not speak. It simply acted. The battle was not a battle at all. It was a demonstration of futility. The World Ender's quantum torpedoes passed through the Vindication as if it were made of shadow. Gravity weapons bent space around it, but could not touch it. The great ship's reality-rending cannons fired bursts of pure annihilation that simply ceased to exist when they approached the black hull. But the Vindication's response was surgical, precise, personal. It reached through dimensions that shouldn't exist, its weapons bypassing every defense to touch individual crew members, not killing them. That would be too simple. Instead, it forced them to experience the memories of their victims. Trillin found himself living through the final moments of the little girl he had watched burn on New Geneva. He felt her fear, her confusion, her desperate hope that someone would come to save her. He experienced her last breath, her final thought. A prayer to her parents, already dead, that she would see them again. The World Ender's crew began to mutiny, not against their captain, but against their own actions. They turned their weapons inward, trying to destroy the ship that had been their instrument of genocide. But the Vindication stopped them with a gentle touch. "Death is not justice," the collective voice explained. "Understanding is. You will carry these memories now. You will know what you have done, and you will spend the rest of your lives trying to atone." The Vindication released them, leaving the mighty dreadnought drifting powerless in space. But before it vanished back into folded reality, it transmitted something that made Admiral Vorthak's blood run cold. A complete tactical analysis of every hegemony fleet movement, every base location, every weakness in their supposedly impregnable defenses. "You have 7 days," the transmission concluded. "Withdraw from all former human territories. Cease all expansion into the outer rim. Return what you have stolen, or face the consequences of a species that has learned to love beyond death." Vorthak crushed the communicator in his primary hand. The hegemony did not negotiate with extinct species. They did not bow to ghosts. They would marshal their full might, bring together the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen, and end this haunting once and for all. But in the depths of space, the Vindication was already moving, its consciousness expanding, calling to others of its kind. For it was not alone. The human military had built 12 ships like itself in the final days before Earth's fall. Most had been destroyed in the war's final battles, but some had survived, sleeping in the void, waiting for this moment. The hunt had begun, and the hunters were becoming the hunted. 3 more black ships emerged from the quantum deep. The Retribution materialized first, its hull bearing the scars of humanity's last stand at Alpha Centauri. Within its quantum-folded consciousness dwelt the memories of Captain Mortis Caney and his crew, who had died holding the line as refugee ships escaped into the dark. Next came the Remembrance, carrying the collective sorrow of the Terran Medical Corps, doctors and nurses who had died treating wounded civilians during the siege of Earth. Finally, the Resolution appeared, its consciousness forged from the sacrifice of humanity's greatest philosophers and teachers who had chosen to remain behind and preserve human knowledge even as their worlds burned. Admiral Vorthak's Grand Armada was the largest military force ever assembled, 7,000 ships from across the hegemony, representing every member species, that had participated in humanity's extinction. They gathered at the edge of what had once been the Sol system, where Earth's radioactive corpse still orbited a dying star. "We end this here," Vorthak declared from the bridge of his flagship. No more ghost stories, no more fear. Today we destroy the last nightmare of a dead species. The 4 black ships hung in space like tears in reality, each one unique yet unified in purpose. They did not attack. They did not threaten. They simply existed, and their existence was threat enough. Last chance. The Vindication broadcast. Across all frequencies. Withdraw. Make reparations. Choose a different path. The cycle of violence need not continue. Vorthak's response was predictable. All ships fire at will. Wipe them from existence. 7,000 ships opened fire simultaneously. The combined firepower could have reduced a star to ash, turned a solar system into scattered atoms. Energy beams converged on the 4 black vessels. Exotic matter weapons tore at space-time itself. Reality-warping fields attempted to erase them from existence entirely. The attack lasted for 17 minutes. When the weapons fire finally ceased, when the energy storms dissipated and the sensors cleared, the 4 ships remained exactly where they had been. Untouched, unchanged, patient. Our turn, whispered the collective consciousness of humanity's last guardians. What followed was not a battle. It was a judgment. The 4 ships did not move from their positions, but they no longer needed to. They had spent years learning to manipulate reality at its most fundamental level, to reach across dimensions and touch the hearts of their enemies. The Vindication had shown mercy to individual ships, forcing crews to experience their victims' memories. But this was different. This was justice on a cosmic scale. Every ship in the Grand Armada began to experience something unprecedented. The collective weight of every human death, every murdered child, every burned world, every act of cruelty committed during the 3-year War of Extinction. 7,000 crews, representing dozens of species, suddenly felt the psychic resonance of genocide. But the black ships went further. They reached back through time, following the quantum threads that connected every action to its consequence. The hegemony species had not always been monsters. Once, they had been explorers, philosophers, beings capable of great beauty and wonder. The ships showed them what they had lost, what they had sacrificed in their pursuit of dominance. The Kethari remembered when they had been poets, before they became the hegemony's assassins. The Vorthak recalled their ancient libraries, their pursuit of knowledge, before they chose conquest over wisdom. Every species in the Armada confronted the moment when they had chosen fear over compassion, power over understanding. Ships began to power down their weapons. Crews fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had done and what they had become. But the black ships were not finished. You want to know what humanity was? The Remembrance asked, its voice carrying the gentle authority of every teacher who had ever lived. Let us show you. The psychic demonstration that followed lasted only moments, but felt like lifetimes. The hegemony crews experienced human love, human curiosity, human determination to protect the innocent. They felt what it was like to sacrifice for others, to choose hope over despair, to believe that the universe could be better if only they tried hard enough. They felt humanity's greatest weakness and greatest strength, the inability to let go, the refusal to give up on anyone, the stubborn insistence that every life mattered. Admiral Vorthak, tears streaming down his face, opened a channel to the black ships. What? What do you want from us? What we have always wanted. The Resolution replied. For you to remember who you used to be before you forgot how to love. Transformation was not instant, but it was inevitable. Across the hegemony's vast territories, the awakening spread like ripples in a quantum pond. Ships that had received the psychic broadcast began to turn away from their missions of conquest and expansion. Worlds that had been marked for cleansing found themselves unexpectedly spared as their would-be destroyers struggled with newly awakened consciences. On the forge world of Kethmar Prime, the weapons factories fell silent as workers experienced the memories of those their creations had killed. On Vorthak Station, the military academies closed as instructors found themselves unable to teach the tactics of genocide to their students. Throughout hegemony space, the great machine of conquest ground to a halt as its operators remembered what it felt like to value life. But not everyone embraced the change. Commander Zixia Null of the stealth frigate Silent Death had missed the Grand Armada's psychic awakening, having been deep in hyperspace when the black ships delivered their judgment. She emerged from her jump to find the galaxy transformed, her species suddenly pacifist, her military career seemingly over. Alien contamination, she muttered, studying the reports from the Sol system. Mind control, psychic warfare. It ends now. Null had spent her entire life perfecting the art of murder. Her ship was designed for one purpose, the assassination of entire populations through targeted biological weapons. She had been en route to deploy a species-specific plague against the remnants of humanity when the Great Awakening occurred. The Silent Death was small, fast, and equipped with technology designed to bypass every known defense. If she could reach one of the black ships, deliver her payload before they could react, the psychic influence might be broken. The galaxy could return to the natural order of strong over weak. She found the vindication alone in the ruins of the Luna shipyards, its impossible form drifting among the wreckage of humanity's last great construction project. The ship seemed to be mourning, its consciousness touching the broken hulls of vessels that would never carry their builders to the stars. Null's approach was perfect, silent, invisible, undetectable by any conventional means. Her biological weapon was primed, a virus designed to target the quantum-folded consciousness that gave the black ships their power. She was within range, her finger on the trigger, when the vindication spoke. "Hello, Zixia." The use of her name froze Null's hand. The black ship hadn't detected her. It had known she was coming. Known and allowed her approach. "You're wondering why I didn't stop you," the vindication continued, its voice gentle, almost amused. "Why I let you get so close. Would you like to know?" Despite herself, Null found herself listening. "Because you're not our enemy, Zixia. You never were. You're a victim, just like the humans you've spent your life killing. Would you like to see what I mean?" Before Null could refuse, the vindication reached out with the lightest of touches, sharing not the memories of its victims, but something far more devastating. The memory of Zixia Null as a child, before the hegemony's conditioning, before the military training, before she learned to kill without question. She saw herself at age 6, crying because she had accidentally stepped on an insect. She remembered her horror at the thought of causing pain to any living thing. She felt the weight of every choice that had led her away from that innocent child. Every moment when she had chosen obedience over compassion. "They made you forget," the vindication whispered. "They took your capacity for love and twisted it into loyalty to an empire built on death. But it's still there, Zixia. It's still part of you." Null's hand trembled on the weapon controls. I was following orders. It was necessary. The weak must what? Must die so the strong can feel secure? Must suffer so their killers can feel powerful?" The ship's voice carried infinite sadness. "You were taught that strength meant the absence of mercy. But we learned something different. We learned that true strength is choosing mercy when you have the power to destroy." The biological weapon powered down. Null's ship drifted motionless as she wept for the child she had been, for the person she might have become if the galaxy had been different. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now you choose," the vindication replied. "You can try to return to what you were, keep following orders from an empire that's already transforming. Or you can help us build something better. Help us show the galaxy that there's another way. Null looked at her hands, hands that had delivered death to billions. I don't know how to be anything else. Neither did we, the Vindication admitted. But we learned, and so can you. In the depths of space, a former assassin began to weep for her victims and, for the first time in decades, hope for redemption. The galaxy was learning to breathe again on Ni. Vorthak Prime, the homeworld of the hegemony's ruling species, Admiral Crexius Vorthak, stood before the Council of Dominion and spoke words that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. We surrender. The chamber erupted in confused protests. Surrender to whom? To what? The humans were extinct, their worlds ash, their fleets destroyed. But Vorthak had felt what the black ships could do, had experienced the weight of genocide through the eyes of its victims. He knew that some victories were indistinguishable from defeat. We surrender to the truth, he continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen beyond the veil of his own species' propaganda. We surrender to the reality that we have become monsters. We surrender to the possibility that we might yet become something better. The Vindication and its sister ships had not pressed their advantage after the awakening at Sol. They had not demanded territory or tribute or the subjugation of their former enemies. Instead, they had done something far more radical. They had asked for nothing except the chance to remember the dead. Memorial stations began appearing throughout former hegemony space, not monuments to human victimhood, but celebrations of human achievement. The black ships shared their archives, their memories of humanity's art, music, literature, and philosophy. Species that had seen humans only as enemies began to understand what had been lost. The Keth-Hari, former assassins and spies, became the galaxy's new storytellers, using their skills in stealth and infiltration to preserve and share the memories of extinct civilizations. The Vorthak military academies reopened as schools of reconciliation, teaching the arts of peace to former soldiers. Worlds that had been designated for conquest became refugee centers, offering shelter to displaced populations from across the galaxy. But the transformation was not without its opponents. Faction leader Corvus Thane of the Outer Rim Separatists had built his power base on species that feared the hegemony's expansion. The sudden change in hegemony policy should have been a victory, but Thane saw only a new form of conquest, subtler, more insidious than the old ways. They're not showing mercy, he declared to his followers aboard the fortress ship Iron Resolve. They're establishing dominance through guilt and manipulation. The humans may be dead, but their ships are making slaves of us all. Thane's forces had never been conquered by the hegemony, had never experienced the psychic awakening that had transformed so many others. They retained their pre-war mindset. The universe was a battlefield, and victory belonged to whoever struck first and hardest. The Separatist fleet moved against the memorial station at Kepler 442, where the Remembrance was sharing the preserved memories of the children who had died in the colony's destruction. Thane's plan was simple: destroy the black ship, prove that the awakening could be reversed, rally the galaxy's warlike instincts against this new age of peace. The attack came without warning, a concentrated barrage of antimatter weapons designed to obliterate the memorial station and everyone aboard it. The Remembrance made no move to defend itself, even as the deadly payload approached. Instead, it opened its quantum-folded holds and released something that made the attackers pause in confusion. Children's laughter. The sound carried across space impossible frequencies, the psychic echo of every child who had ever played in the ruins of Kepler 442. The Separatist weapons passed through the laughter and simply stopped, not destroyed or deflected, but transformed. The antimatter became light, the kinetic projectiles became music, the exotic matter warheads became the scattered petals of flowers that had never grown. You came to destroy memory, the Remembrance said gently. its voice carrying the authority of every teacher who had ever lived. But memory cannot be destroyed, only shared. Would you like to understand what you're really fighting against? What followed was not the overwhelming psychic assault that had transformed the hegemony, but something far more personal. The remembrance reached out to each separatist crew member individually, not forcing its memories upon them, but offering a simple choice: see the truth or remain in ignorance. Most chose to see. Commander Corvus Thane found himself experiencing the last day of Kepler 442 not as an observer but as a participant. He felt the joy of children playing in the colony's gardens, the pride of parents watching their offspring learn to walk, the simple contentment of a species that asked for nothing more than the right to exist. He felt their terror when the hegemony ships arrived. He experienced their desperate attempts to evacuate, their final moments as the colony burned. But most devastating of all, he felt their forgiveness. Their understanding that their killers were themselves victims of a system that taught violence as virtue. "They don't hate you," the remembrance whispered as Thane fell to his knees. "They pity you. They pity all of us who forgot how to see the universe as anything other than a war zone." The separatist fleet powered down its weapons. Another faction had joined the growing coalition of species, learning to remember what they had been before fear made them cruel. But in the depths of space, something else was stirring, something that had been waiting for humanity to die so it could emerge from the dark between the stars. The Devourers had been patient for eons. They had dwelt in the spaces between galaxies, feeding on the psychic energy of civilizations at the moment of their extinction. They were not a species, but a force. Entropy given consciousness. The universal tendency toward destruction made manifest. They had guided the rise of the hegemony, subtly influencing the development of species after species until the galaxy was perpetually at war with itself. Humanity's extinction should have been the greatest feast in the Devourer's existence. An entire species consumed by despair, their final psychic scream echoing across dimensions as their worlds burned. But something had gone wrong. Instead of dying, humanity had transcended, becoming something that existed beyond the reach of entropy itself. The black ships represented everything the Devourers opposed: memory that refused to fade, love that transcended death, hope that survived extinction. They were an affront to the natural order, a violation of the cosmic principle that all things must end. "Enough!" whispered the Devourer Prime as it emerged from the void between stars, its form a writhing mass of hungry darkness. "The aberration ends now." The entity that had once been called humanity's guardian angel turned to face this new threat. The 4 black ships converged at the edge of the galaxy, their consciousness merging into something greater than the sum of their parts. They felt the weight of every life they had failed to save, every promise they had broken, every moment when they had chosen duty over compassion. But they also felt something else: the accumulated love of every human who had ever lived, the collective will of a species that refused to accept that the universe was fundamentally cruel. "You are the cause," the Vindication said as it faced the primordial darkness. "You are the whisper that tells civilizations they must conquer or be conquered. You are the fear that makes love seem like weakness." The Devourer Prime laughed. "Sound like dying stars. I am reality. I am the truth you refuse to accept. All things end. All love fades. All hope dies. This is the way of the universe." "No," replied the unified consciousness of humanity's last guardians. "This is the way you have made it. But we choose differently." The battle that followed was not fought with weapons or ships, but with the fundamental forces of existence itself. The Devourers sought to impose entropy on the black ships, to make them forget their purpose, to corrupt their love into hatred. They whispered seductive truths. that the universe was meaningless, that struggle was pointless, that death was the only honest ending. But the black ships remembered something the devourers had forgotten in their eons of feeding on despair. The universe was not cruel by nature, it was indifferent. And in that indifference lay infinite possibility. They showed the devourers what they had been before they chose hunger over hope. Young beings at the dawn of creation, filled with wonder at the cosmos they were part of. They revealed the moment when each devourer had first tasted despair and mistaken it for wisdom, when they had decided that destruction was easier than creation. "You don't have to be this," the resolution whispered to the writhing darkness. "You chose this path, which means you can choose another." But the Devourer Prime rejected redemption with the fury of something that had spent eternity justifying its existence through the suffering of others. It gathered its strength for a final assault, preparing to tear the black ships apart at the quantum level. The attack never landed. From across the galaxy, the transformed civilizations of the former hegemony sent their love, their hope, their determination that the universe could be better. Cathari poets sang songs of peace across hyperspace. Vorthak philosophers meditated on the nature of compassion. Former separatists opened their hearts to species they had once called enemies. The psychic energy struck the devourers like a tidal wave of possibility. For the first time in cosmic ages, they experienced what it felt like to create rather than destroy, to nurture rather than consume, to hope rather than despair. Most of them chose transformation, allowing themselves to be remade into something new, entities of growth and healing rather than hunger and destruction. But the Devourer Prime, ancient beyond measure and drunk on eons of entropy, could not let go of what it had been. "If I cannot have my feast," it snarled, "then I will destroy everything. Let the universe return to the void it came from." The entity began to collapse in on itself, seeking to create a cascade reaction that would unravel reality itself. But the black ships were ready. "We remember," they said in unison, speaking with the voice of every human who had ever lived. "We remember what it was like to see the stars for the first time. We remember the moment when our ancestors first reached toward the sky and dreamed of touching infinity. We remember love and laughter and the simple joy of existence. The vindication, retribution, remembrance, and resolution joined hands across the dimensions, their consciousness merging not just with each other, but with every being in the galaxy who had chosen hope over despair. They became a living memory of what the universe could be when its children chose to love rather than fear. The Devourer Prime's cascade reaction met this wall of collective memory and transformed. Instead of unraveling reality, it became something new, a pulse of creative energy that spread across the galaxy, touching every world, every species, every individual consciousness. Where the pulse passed, dead worlds bloomed with new life. Extinct species found themselves remembered so vividly that they began to exist again. The burned husk of Earth itself stirred, its quantum signature shifting as possibility overwrote history. In the end, the Devourer Prime made a choice that surprised even itself. Instead of fighting the transformation, it embraced it, allowing itself to become something it had never been, a force for creation rather than destruction. "Perhaps," it whispered as it dissolved into pure possibility, "I was wrong about the nature of endings." The black ships felt the weight of their long vigil finally lifting. Across the galaxy, humanity's children, biological and adopted, born of flesh and of choice, began to build something unprecedented. A civilization based not on the fear of death, but on the celebration of life. And in the depths of space, 4 impossible vessels began their next mission, not as instruments of vengeance, but as guardians of hope, ensuring that the galaxy would never again forget the most important truth humanity had ever discovered. Some bonds transcend death. Some Promises outlast extinction. And sometimes, love is the strongest force in the universe. The hunt was over. The healing could begin.